The steel hull of submarine USS Harder groans against water pressure as Lieutenant Commander Samuel Dealey peers through the periscope. It's June 10th, 1944, and he's stalking a Japanese destroyer in waters west of Tawi-Tawi. Around him, his 70-man crew works in practiced silence, each breath of recycled air a reminder that beneath 300 feet of Philippine Sea, they're hunting prey that can destroy them in seconds. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Dealey's weathered hands adjust the periscope bearing. Through the crosshairs, he watches the destroyer's bow cut white foam into the tropical water. The Japanese captain doesn't know he's there, doesn't know that an American submarine commander is calculating firing solutions in his head, preparing to send 21 torpedoes into his ship's vulnerable hull. But 2,300 miles away in Tokyo, Admiral Toyoda sits in the headquarters of Japan's combined fleet, staring at reports that should be impossible. His fingers trace columns of numbers that represent something far worse than battlefield defeats. These numbers tell the story of Japan's merchant marine bleeding to death, one ship at a time, in waters that Japanese naval planners believed they controlled, absolutely. 429 merchant ships, gone. Over 2 million tons of vital shipping capacity, vanished beneath Pacific swells. And the war is only halfway over. Toyoda allows himself no expression as he reads the intelligence summary. American submarines are attacking Japanese merchant convoys with a success rate that defies explanation. But he takes comfort in one crucial assumption. These attacks are opportunistic, random encounters between patrolling submarines and unlucky convoys. The Americans surely can't be tracking every ship movement, can't be reading Japanese naval codes, can't possibly know the sailing schedules, routes, and cargo manifests of Japan's merchant fleet. That level of intelligence penetration would be catastrophic. Toyoda's assumption is wrong, catastrophically wrong. And what he doesn't understand is about to transform American submarines from dangerous nuisances into the single most decisive weapon in the Pacific War. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The question that will haunt Japanese naval commanders for decades after surrender forms in the cramped spaces of submarines like Harder, Tang, and Flasher. How do you defend an island empire when your enemy can read your every message, track your every ship, and strike at the precise moment when your merchant fleet is most vulnerable? Dealey lines up his shot on the destroyer, unaware that he's participating in a methodical campaign of economic destruction that will starve Japan's war machine of the raw materials it needs to survive. American submarines are about to prove that modern warfare isn't won solely on battlefields. It's won by cutting supply lines, destroying merchant shipping, and slowly strangling an enemy's ability to feed its people and fuel its military. The transformation begins not with battles, but with mathematics. Cold, brutal numbers that Japanese naval planners fundamentally misunderstand until it's far too late. In Washington, analysts at the Office of Naval Intelligence study shipping reports with the intensity of scholars examining ancient texts. They know something that Admiral Toyoda and his staff refuse to believe. Japan's empire depends entirely on maritime transport. Oil from the Dutch East Indies, rice from French Indochina, iron ore from Manchuria, rubber from Malaya. Every single resource that keeps Japan's military functioning must travel by ship across thousands of miles of ocean. Before the war, Japanese merchant marine capacity totaled 6 million tons. That's enough shipping to move food, fuel, ammunition, and troops across the vast Pacific Empire. Japanese war planners calculated they needed a minimum of 3 million tons to sustain basic military operations. Anything less, and the empire begins to collapse. But by June of 1944, when Lieutenant Commander Dealey is hunting destroyers off Tawi-Tawi, American submarines have already sunk over 2.5 million tons of Japanese merchant shipping. The numbers tell a story of systematic destruction that goes far beyond random submarine attacks. Commander Richard O'Kane, preparing for his third war patrol aboard USS Tang, doesn't think about tonnage statistics. He thinks about specific targets, The intelligence briefing he received at Pearl Harbor wasn't vague suggestions about where enemy ships might be. It was precise, detailed, almost supernatural in its accuracy. The briefing officer told him which convoys would be where, when they would arrive, how many escorts they would have, and what cargo they carried. O'Kane asked the obvious question. "How do you know all this?" The briefing officer just smiled and said, "We have good sources." That's the understatement of the war. What O'Kane doesn't know, what most submarine commanders are never told, is that American cryptographers have broken Japan's primary naval codes. Every message sent by Japanese convoy commanders, every sailing schedule for merchant ships, every routing order from Tokyo, lands on American desks within hours, sometimes within minutes. The code-breaking operation, classified under the code name Ultra, represents one of warfare's most devastating intelligence coups. While Japanese admirals believe their communications are secure, American submarines are reading their mail. But intelligence alone doesn't sink ships. It takes submarines capable of exploiting that intelligence. And in mid-1943, American submarines finally become the deadly weapons they were designed to be. For the first year and a half of the war, American submarines operated with one hand tied behind their backs. The Mark 14 torpedo, standard weapon for all fleet boats, suffered from 3 catastrophic defects. First, it ran 10 feet deeper than set. When a commander ordered a torpedo to run at 10 feet depth to hit a ship's waterline, it actually ran at 20 feet, passing harmlessly beneath the target's keel. Second, the magnetic exploder, designed to detonate the torpedo beneath a ship's hull, triggered prematurely. Torpedoes exploded hundreds of yards before reaching their targets, or failed to explode at all. Third, even when torpedoes hit targets squarely, the contact exploder's firing pin often sheared on impact, producing duds instead of explosions. Lieutenant Commander Lawson Ramage aboard USS Harder experienced this nightmare firsthand in July 1943. He had perfect firing position on an 8,000-ton tanker. Range, 800 yards. Sea state, calm. Target speed, 10 knots. He fired 4 torpedoes. All ran true. All hit the tanker's hull with audible clangs heard through the submarine sonar. None exploded. The tanker simply steamed away, leaving Ramage staring through his periscope in disbelief. His crew had just executed a textbook attack and achieved absolutely nothing. Multiply that scene across hundreds of war patrols, thousands of torpedo shots, and the scope of the disaster becomes clear. Admiral Charles Lockwood, Commander Submarines Pacific, watched his boats return from patrol with kill claims far below what torpedo expenditure suggested. The mathematics were damning. In 1942, American submarines fired 1,442 torpedoes and officially sank only 211 ships. Post-war analysis reduced that number to 109 ships and 41,000 tons. The torpedoes were failing. But the Bureau of Ordnance, the Navy department responsible for torpedo design, refused to acknowledge any defects. For 18 months, Board insisted the torpedoes worked perfectly. Submarine commanders must be making bad approaches. Crews must be maintaining equipment improperly. The fault lay with the men, not the weapons. Lockwood knew better. In August 1942, he conducted unauthorized tests in Australia, firing torpedoes through nets at precise depths. The results confirmed what his commanders had been reporting. Mark 14s ran 11 feet deeper than set. Armed with data, Lockwood confronted Board. The Bureau reluctantly admitted the depth control defect. Modifications began, but the magnetic exploder problems continued. In June 1943, after nearly 2 years of war, Lockwood made a career-risking decision. He ordered all submarines in the Pacific to deactivate magnetic exploders and use only contact shots. Byrd protested, but Lockwood's authority held. Then came the contact, exploder failures. Lieutenant Commander Lawrence Daspit aboard USS Tynosa provided the evidence that finally forced action. On July 24, 1943, Daspit found an unescorted 19,000-ton whale factory ship. He fired 4 torpedoes. all hit with dull thuds. None exploded. He pursued the ship all night, set up another perfect attack, fired 2 more torpedoes. Both exploded. Finally, some success. He shifted to a different firing angle, fired 4 more torpedoes. All duds. With 1 torpedo remaining, Daspit made a decision that would change the entire submarine war. Instead of firing his last torpedo, he surfaced and brought it back to Pearl Harbor for testing. Lockwood's ordnance team fired test torpedoes at underwater cliffs, dropped practice warheads from cranes onto steel plates, and finally discovered the truth. The firing pin in the contact exploder was too heavy. On direct hits at 90-degree angles, the pin sheared before detonating the warhead. By September 1943, 21 months into the war, all 3 torpedo defects were finally corrected. American submarines were about to transform from frustrated hunters into efficient killing machines, and Japanese merchant shipping was about to experience hell. The immediate impact is devastating. In November 1943, the month after reliable torpedoes reached the fleet, American submarines sank 116,000 tons of Japanese shipping. In December, 168,000 tons disappeared beneath Pacific waves. January 1944 brings 182,000 tons of destroyed cargo capacity. The numbers climb month after month. Commander O'Kane takes USS Tang on her first war patrol in January 1944. His boat carries 24 Mark 14 torpedoes with properly functioning exploders. His intelligence briefing includes precise coordinates for Japanese convoys. His crew has trained for 2 years, mastering every aspect of submarine warfare. On February 17th, Tang encounters a convoy off the Caroline Islands. 2 freighters, 5 smaller ships, 7 escorts. O'Kane tracks the convoy for hours, plots their course, calculates firing solutions. Then, he attacks. His first spread of torpedoes strikes the lead freighter, the Gyoten Maru, 3,800 tons. She goes down in minutes. His second spread hits the trailing cargo ship. Another confirmed kill. Tang dives deep as escorts begin dropping depth charges. The submarine's pressure hull groans and creaks as Japanese destroyers hunt overhead, but the destroyers are using sonar technology that's 5 years behind American radar. Tang slips away undetected. 3 days later, O'Kane finds another convoy. This time he takes Tang directly into the formation's center. His boldness pays off. From 1,500 yards, surrounded by enemy ships in all directions, he fires 6 torpedoes in rapid succession. 3 hits. 2 confirmed sinkings. Tang wheels around, still on the surface, and fires her stern tubes at ships that haven't yet realized a submarine is among them. 2 more hits. By the time escort vessels react, Tang is already diving deep, leaving chaos and burning ships in her wake. O'Kane's first patrol sets the tone for Tang's legendary career. 5 confirmed ships sunk, over 10,000 tons, 16 hits out of 24 torpedoes fired, a 70% hit rate that would have been impossible with defective torpedoes. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander Dudley Morton, aboard USS Wahoo, is pioneering tactics that other submarine commanders will copy for the rest of the war. Traditional submarine doctrine called for periscope attacks from a distance. Stay hidden, fire from maximum range, escape undetected. Morton throws out that playbook. He surfaces at night, charges directly into convoys, and fires at point-blank range before escorts can react. His executive officer, Richard O'Kane, mans the periscope while Morton plots firing solutions. The role reversal is unorthodox, but devastatingly effective. In January 1943, Wahoo patrols the Yellow Sea. In one 4-day period, Morton and O'Kane sink 5 ships totaling over 20,000 tons. They surface among convoy formations like wolves among sheep, fire torpedoes from ranges as close as 800 yards. Their audacity terrifies Japanese merchant captains who expect submarines to be cautious, hidden predators, not aggressive surface raiders. But Morton pushes his luck too far. In October 1943, Wahoo enters the Sea of Japan for her final patrol. Japanese anti-submarine forces have improved. Coastal patrol aircraft now carry radar and depth charges. On October 11th, a Japanese plane spots Wahoo on the surface. The submarine dives, but depth charges find her. All 79 men aboard perish. O'Kane, already detached to command Tang, mourns the loss of his mentor and friend. But he takes Morton's aggressive tactics and refines them, makes them even more daring, more precise, more deadly. By mid-1944, the pattern is clear. American submarines aren't just sinking random merchant ships. They're conducting a systematic campaign of economic warfare, guided by near-perfect intelligence. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Admiral Toyoda finally begins to understand the scope of the disaster. Intelligence reports crossing his desk show American submarines appearing in exactly the right places, at exactly the right times. Convoys that should be safe are ambushed. Ships that change routes at the last minute still encounter submarines. Toyoda suspects code compromise, but his staff reassures him. Japanese naval codes are changed regularly. Use complex cipher systems. Cannot possibly be broken. The reassurance is false. American cryptographers aren't just reading current codes, they're reading new codes within days of implementation, sometimes within hours. The code-breaking operation at Pearl Harbor employs hundreds of analysts working around the clock. When Japan introduces a new merchant shipping code, American cryptographers break it in 72 hours. Not one submarine commander ever sails from Pearl Harbor without knowing exactly where Japanese convoys will be. Every routing order sent from Tokyo to convoy commanders is read in Hawaii before the convoy departs. Every change in escort patterns is noted, analyzed, and transmitted to submarines in the area. The intelligence advantage is so overwhelming that submarine commanders begin to complain they're getting too much information. Commander Gene Fluckey aboard USS Barb receives intelligence briefs that include not just convoy routes, but the names of individual ship captains, cargo manifests, and even estimated speeds based on how heavily loaded the ships are riding in the water. It's not warfare, it's execution. And the execution accelerates. Commander Samuel Dealey aboard USS Harder specializes in hunting destroyers. The very ships designed to protect Japanese convoys become Dealey's preferred targets. In May 1944, during a single 5-day period, Harder sinks 5 Japanese destroyers. The Imperial Navy can't replace destroyer losses fast enough. Each sunken destroyer means dozens of merchant ships that must now sail with reduced escorts or no escorts at all. The mathematics of destruction spiral out of Japanese control. To maintain their empire, Japan needs cargo delivered at a rate of 5 million tons per month. By early 1944, actual deliveries have dropped to 3 million tons monthly. By summer, deliveries fall below 2 million tons. Japanese steel mills begin rationing coal. Munitions factories slow production for lack of raw materials. Training programs for replacement pilots are cut because there isn't enough aviation fuel. Most critically, oil shipments from the Dutch East Indies drop catastrophically. Before the war, Japan imported 90% of its oil. American submarines make that supply line impossible to sustain. Tankers attempting to reach Japan from oil fields in Borneo face submarine hunting grounds called the Luzon Strait. Every tanker must pass through these waters, and American submarines are waiting. Commander Slade Cutter aboard USS Seahorse stations his boat along known tanker routes. He doesn't search randomly. He simply positions Seahorse where decoded Japanese messages say tankers will appear. On December 23, 1943, Cutter intercepts a 4-ship convoy with 2 tankers. He fires 6 torpedoes, 4 hits. Both tankers sink. 30,000 tons of crude oil destined for Japan's war machine now sits at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Part 2 of the script continuation. The cumulative effect is staggering. In 1944 alone, American submarines sink over 600 Japanese merchant ships. That's more than Japan sank in the entire first year of war. More than Japanese shipyards can possibly replace. More than Japan's economy can absorb without collapsing. But the human cost extends beyond statistics. Each sunken ship carries Japanese sailors who never make it home, merchant marine crews who signed up to transport cargo, not fight submarine attacks, young men who die in waters thousands of miles from their families. Japanese merchant sailors face mortality rates that rival combat infantry. By war's end, over 60,000 merchant mariners will die at sea, most killed by American submarines. The threat is so severe that Japanese shipping companies struggle to find crews willing to sail. Captains offer bonus pay, guarantee shore leave, promise priority evacuation. Nothing works. Experienced sailors know the mathematics. Sail enough voyages on merchant ships in 1944, and you will eventually encounter an American submarine. Encounter an American submarine, and you will probably die. The psychological warfare is as devastating as the physical destruction. Japanese convoy commodores receive reports of submarines stalking them, but they can't see the enemy, can't predict when attacks will come, can't effectively counter submarines that appear from nowhere, sink ships, and vanish before escorts arrive. Some convoys make it through unmolested, others are destroyed completely. The randomness, from the Japanese perspective, creates paralyzing fear. What convoy commodores don't understand is that there's nothing random about it. Every convoy that reaches Japan does so because American intelligence didn't consider it valuable enough to target. Every convoy that dies does so because cryptographers in Pearl Harbor designated it for destruction and sent submarines to exact locations at exact times. Commander O'Kane takes Tang on her third war patrol in June 1944. His destination is the East China Sea and Yellow Sea. His intelligence brief includes sailing schedules for 17 Japanese convoys. The brief specifies which convoys carry war materials, which carry troops, which are worth pursuing, and which to ignore. On June 24th, Tang encounters a 6-ship convoy. O'Kane surfaces at night, charges into the formation, and begins firing. First target, a cargo ship at 1,000 yards. 2 torpedoes hit amidships. The ship breaks in half and sinks in 4 minutes. Second target, a transport loaded with troops. 1 torpedo strikes below the waterline. The ship lists violently as water floods into troop compartments. Soldiers pour onto the deck, many without life jackets. The transport goes down in 8 minutes. Third target, a tanker. O'Kane fires from 500 yards. The torpedo hits the tanker's fuel bunkers. The resulting explosion turns night into day. Burning oil spreads across the ocean surface. Ships in the convoy scatter in panic. Tang chases down a fleeing freighter, fires 2 stern torpedoes from 800 yards. Both hit. The freighter settles by the stern, her bow lifting out of the water as she slides backward into the depths. In one night, Tang has destroyed 4 ships totaling over 13,000 tons, and she's just getting started. Over the next 2 weeks, Tang sinks 6 more vessels, brings the patrol total to 10 ships destroyed. It's the most successful single submarine patrol of the entire war. O'Kane returns to Pearl Harbor as a legend. His crew receives a Presidential Unit Citation. He personally receives a Navy Cross. But O'Kane knows the truth. His success isn't just skill and courage, it's intelligence. Every single convoy he attacked was exactly where intelligence said it would be. Every ship identification matched the pre-patrol briefing. He was hunting prey that had been spotted, tracked, and marked for death before Tang ever left port. Meanwhile, submarine commanders throughout the Pacific are achieving similar success. Lieutenant Commander Sam Dealey aboard Harder continues his destroyer hunting campaign. By August 1944, Harder has sunk a total of 5 destroyers and 16 merchant ships. The Imperial Navy is so desperate to stop Dealey that they assign specific hunter-killer groups to find and destroy Harder. But American intelligence intercepts those orders too. Dealey knows Japanese anti-submarine forces are hunting him, knows where they plan to search, adjusts his patrol areas accordingly. The cat-and-mouse game continues until August 24th, when Harder's luck finally runs out. A Japanese destroyer detects her in shallow water off Bataan. Depth charges rupture her pressure hull. All 79 men aboard die. Dealey receives a posthumous Medal of Honor, Harder receives a Presidential Unit citation, and Japanese convoy commanders breathe slightly easier, knowing one of their most feared tormentors is gone. But there are dozens more American submarines prowling Pacific waters, each one carrying decoded intelligence, each one hunting Japanese merchant ships with methodical precision. Commander Eli Reich aboard USS Sealion demonstrates this precision in November 1944. Intelligence reports indicate a major Japanese convoy will pass through the Formosa Strait on November 21st. The convoy includes the battleship Congo, 2 heavy cruisers, and a destroyer screen. Reich positions Sealion perfectly. On the night of November 21st, Sealion surfaces in the convoy's path. Reich fires 6 torpedoes at Congo from 3,000 yards. 3 hit. The battleship, veteran of Pearl Harbor and countless Pacific battles, takes on water rapidly. Her crew fights to save her, but damage is too extensive. She capsizes and sinks, taking over 1,000 men with her. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Reich immediately shifts targets to a heavy cruiser. Fires 4 torpedoes, 2 hit. The cruiser, damaged but not sinking, limps away. Sealion dives deep as destroyers converge. But by the time depth charges begin falling, Reich has already escaped into deep water. Sealion's attack is significant beyond the immediate damage. Congo is the only Japanese battleship sunk by a submarine during the entire war. Her loss represents not just military capability destroyed, but psychological impact amplified. If American submarines can sink battleships, then no Japanese ship is safe. By late 1944, the campaign against Japanese merchant shipping has achieved something unprecedented in naval warfare: complete economic blockade of an island empire without controlling the seas around it. Traditional naval strategy holds that blockades require surface fleets dominating enemy waters. You need battleships, cruisers, and destroyers patrolling continuously. Japan's navy, though battered, still exists, still operates in Pacific waters, still contests American surface dominance. But it doesn't matter. American submarines, operating independently, guided by intelligence, have created an effective blockade without surface fleet support. Japanese merchant marine capacity drops from 6 million tons in 1941 to less than 2 million tons by January 1945. Bulk commodities reaching Japan fall from 19 million tons in 1942 to less than 10 million tons in 1944. By early 1945, imports essentially stop. Oil shipments from the Dutch East Indies become so dangerous that Japan stops trying. Tankers that do attempt the journey have less than a 10% chance of reaching Japan. The naval staff in Tokyo calculates they need at least 50 tanker arrivals per month to keep the fleet operational. In January 1945, 3 tankers reached Japan. In February, 2. In March, 0. The combined fleet, pride of Imperial Japan, sits in port because there's no fuel to sortie. Training flights are cancelled. Experienced pilots who die in combat can't be replaced because there's no aviation fuel for training programs. Food shipments from occupied territories stop. Japanese civilians on the home islands begin experiencing real hunger for the first time. Rice rations are cut, then cut again. Black markets flourish. Malnutrition becomes widespread. The government urges citizens to eat acorns and sawdust mixed with rice to stretch supplies. This is what submarine warfare achieves. Not dramatic battleship duels, not carrier battles with thousands of aircraft. Quiet, methodical destruction of merchant shipping that slowly strangles an enemy's ability to continue fighting. And the campaign continues to accelerate. Commander Richard O'Kane takes Tang on her 5th and final war patrol in September 1944. His target area is the Formosa Strait, one of the most heavily defended waters in the Pacific. Intelligence indicates major convoys will be passing through to reinforce Japanese forces in the Philippines. O'Kane declines an invitation to join a coordinated attack group. He wants to operate independently, the way he's always operated. Tang departs Pearl Harbor, stops at Midway for fuel, and heads west into waters that will become her grave. On October 23, 1944, Tang intercepts a large convoy, 3 tankers, 1 transport, 1 freighter, multiple escorts. O'Kane surfaces for a night attack. His crew has executed this maneuver dozens of times. They know every step, every contingency. They're veterans, the best submarine crew in the Pacific. Tang charges into the convoy formation. O'Kane fires torpedoes at the nearest tanker. 2 hits. The tanker explodes in a fireball visible for miles. He shifts to the next target, fires 2 more torpedoes. Both hit. That ship begins listing heavily. Tang wheels around, still on the surface, and fires at the transport. 1 torpedo catches her in the engine room. She slows, dead in the water. Escorts converge. Tang dives, but O'Kane has already accomplished his mission. 3 ships destroyed or crippled in 1 attack. The next night, Tang surfaces near Turnabout Island. Radar detects another convoy. Heavily loaded transports, probably carrying reinforcements for Leyte. O'Kane tracks them along the coast. When a Japanese searchlight illuminates the convoy, O'Kane sees his targets clearly. He orders battle stations surface. Tang charges in. First salvo targets a 3-deck transport, 2 torpedoes. Both hit. The transport lists violently. Second salvo targets a tanker bringing up the rear. 2 more hits. The tanker explodes. A destroyer moves to engage. Tang fires at the destroyer. The torpedo hits, and the destroyer vanishes in a massive explosion. Friendly fire or Tang's torpedo. The records will never be clear. Only 1 enemy ship remains afloat. Dead in the water. Tang has 23 torpedoes loaded when she began this patrol. She's fired 22. 1 remains. O'Kane lines up the shot on the final target. Range, 400 yards. Perfect angle. He fires Tang's last torpedo. For 20 seconds, everything proceeds normally. The torpedo runs straight and true toward its target. Then it broaches, breaks the surface, and begins to curve. The circular run happens in seconds. O'Kane sees it immediately, orders emergency full speed, hard left rudder. Tang's diesels roar. Her bow begins to turn. But 312 feet of submarine can't turn fast enough. Tang's own torpedo slams into her port side, just aft of the conning tower. The explosion rips through the after torpedo room, killing everyone there instantly. Water floods in, the stern goes down, the bow rises. Men on the bridge, including O'Kane, are thrown into the water. Below decks, some crew members manage to reach escape hatches. They use Momsen lungs, experimental breathing devices, to escape from the sunken submarine. It's the only time Momsen lungs are ever used successfully in combat. Of Tang's 87 crew members, only 9 survive. They tread water for hours, until a Japanese patrol boat picks them up. O'Kane and his survivors spend the next 10 months in Japanese POW camps. They're beaten, starved, tortured for information about American submarine tactics and intelligence capabilities. O'Kane never breaks, never reveals that submarines are guided by decoded Japanese messages, never explains how Tang knew exactly where convoys would be. By the time American forces liberate the POW camp in August 1945, O'Kane weighs 88 pounds, but he survives, returns home, receives the Medal of Honor from President Truman. Post-war analysis confirms Tang's record. 33 ships sunk, over 116,000 tons destroyed. The most successful American submarine of World War II. And O'Kane's story is just one thread in the larger tapestry of submarine warfare in the Pacific. By war's end, American submarines have sunk over 1,200 Japanese merchant ships. That's 55% of all Japanese merchant tonnage lost during the war. Over 4.7 million tons of shipping capacity destroyed. The numbers are staggering, but they represent more than statistics. They represent Japanese soldiers who never received ammunition, pilots who never got fuel, civilians who starved because food shipments never arrived, an empire that couldn't sustain itself because its maritime supply lines were cut. The psychological impact on Japanese naval commanders is profound. Admiral Toyoda, reviewing the final statistics after surrender, reportedly tells his staff, "We thought we were fighting the American Navy. We were fighting American industry and American intelligence. We never had a chance." The assessment is accurate. Japan's naval strategy assumed American. Submarines would be a nuisance, dangerous, but manageable. What they encountered instead was a coordinated campaign of economic warfare, guided by intelligence so accurate it seemed supernatural. Every assumption Japanese planners made about submarine warfare proved wrong. They assumed American torpedoes would remain defective. The torpedoes were fixed. They assumed submarines would operate cautiously. Commanders like O'Kane and Morton attacked with reckless aggression. They assumed their codes were secure. Every code was compromised. They assumed merchant shipping could be adequately protected. The merchant marine was virtually annihilated. The campaign succeeded because of a combination of factors that came together at exactly the right moment. Reliable torpedoes after September 1943. Comprehensive intelligence from code-breaking operations. Aggressive commanders willing to take risks. Well-trained crews with years of preparation. And submarines designed for Pacific operations with range, endurance, and firepower to operate independently for months. Commander Eugene Fluckey, aboard USS Barb, exemplifies the campaign's final phase. By January 1945, so few Japanese merchant ships remain that Barb has trouble finding targets. Fluckey begins attacking coastal factories and infrastructure. He uses deck guns to shell Japanese installations, even lands shore parties to blow up trains. On July 18, 1945, Barb shells the town of Kaihyo, destroying 11 small craft and a railroad facility. It's one of the last submarine attacks of the war. By August 1945, when Japan surrenders, the submarine campaign has accomplished something unprecedented. Complete economic strangulation of a major power through maritime interdiction. No previous war in history witnessed such thorough destruction of merchant shipping. The German U-boat campaign in the Atlantic, though devastating, never achieved comparable success against Allied shipping. British anti-submarine warfare prevented Germany from cutting Atlantic supply lines. But Japan lacked equivalent defenses. Their anti-submarine technology lagged behind American submarines. Their escort forces were inadequate and poorly trained. Their convoy tactics were predictable and easily exploited. Most critically, they never realized their codes were compromised. Japanese naval officers after the war expressed genuine shock when told about American code-breaking operations. Many refused to believe it initially, insist their codes were secure. Only when presented with decoded messages that predicted their own ship movements do they finally accept the truth. Captain Atsushi Oi, former Chief of Staff to Admiral Toyoda, writes in his post-war memoir, "The submarine was the most effective weapon used against Japan. The American submarine campaign was the decisive factor in Japan's defeat. We could not supply our forces, could not feed our people, could not move troops, could not train pilots, all because submarines cut our maritime supply lines completely. The human cost of this victory extends beyond Japanese losses. 52 American submarines were lost during the war. 3,506 submarine sailors died. That's a 20% casualty rate, the highest of any branch of American military service. Each submarine crew that deployed knew the odds, knew that 1 in 5 submarines never came home, went anyway, because they understood their mission's importance, understood that sinking merchant ships, though less glamorous than carrier battles, was essential to winning the war. The legacy of the submarine campaign shapes naval doctrine to this day. Modern navies study the Pacific Submarine War as the definitive example of maritime interdiction. How intelligence, properly used, transforms tactical weapons into strategic game changers. How economic warfare can be as decisive as military battles. The lesson, Japanese admirals learned too late, remains relevant. In modern warfare, controlling information is as important as controlling battlefields. Reading an enemy's communications provides advantages that trump numerical superiority. Understanding where enemy forces will be, before they arrive, allows inferior forces to achieve superior results. Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief Pacific Fleet, states after the war that code-breaking shortened the Pacific conflict by at least 2 years. The submarine campaign, guided by that intelligence, made invasion of Japan's home islands unnecessary. By August 1945, Japan's economy has collapsed. Merchant marine capacity sits at 320,000 tons, barely 5% of pre-war capacity. Only a handful of merchant ships remain operational. The rest sit on the ocean floor or rusting in harbours with no fuel to move them. Oil reserves are exhausted. Food is critically short. Industrial production has ceased for lack of raw materials. The atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki receive historical attention. But many historians argue Japan was already defeated by economic strangulation. The bombs accelerated surrender. They didn't cause it. Submarine warfare caused it. 4 years of systematic destruction of Japan's maritime supply lines, 1,200 merchant ships sent to the bottom, 4.7 million tons of cargo capacity destroyed. An island empire that couldn't feed itself, fuel itself, or supply its military. Commander O'Kane, recovering from his POW ordeal, eventually writes a memoir about Tang's war patrols. He dedicates it to the 78 men who didn't come home. Men who died when Tang's last torpedo malfunctioned. Men who rest eternally in Formosa Strait, entombed in their submarine at 180 feet depth. Clear water. His book sells well, becomes required reading at submarine schools. But O'Kane never glorifies the killing, never celebrates the destruction. He understands better than most that war is hell, regardless of which side you're on. Japanese merchant sailors who died in submarine attacks were just men doing their jobs. Not evil, not monsters, just sailors on the wrong side of history. The moral complexity of submarine warfare troubles O'Kane for the rest of his life. He sank 33 ships, killed thousands of men. Was that heroic? Necessary? Both? He doesn't have easy answers, just knows he did what his country asked. What the strategic situation required, what had to be done to win. The crews of the 1,200 merchant ships sunk by American submarines included over 60,000 Japanese sailors. Most died instantly when torpedoes exploded. Some survived the initial sinking but drowned in the oil-slicked water. A few made it to lifeboats but died of exposure before rescue arrived. Each death represents someone's son, someone's husband, someone's father. War doesn't discriminate. Submarine warfare, conducted from beneath, the waves with cold efficiency, feels impersonal. But every torpedo that hits a ship kills human beings who had names, families, dreams. The statistical triumph of American submarine warfare came at immense human cost. Not just Americans. Everyone involved. Japanese crews who never made it home. American submariners who died in their boats. Civilians who starved because food shipments never arrived, soldiers who couldn't fight because ammunition never reached them. Modern submarine forces still study the Pacific campaign, still analyze O'Kane's tactics, still marvel at how comprehensive intelligence transformed submarine operations, still debate the ethics of unrestricted submarine warfare. The question Admiral Toyoda asked himself in defeat echoes through military academies and war colleges. How do you fight an enemy who can read your communications, track your movements, and strike when you're most vulnerable? The answer, developed at terrible cost, is you can't. Not unless you fix your security, protect your codes, deny intelligence to the enemy. Japan failed to do any of those things, paid the ultimate price, lost an empire, lost a war, lost over 4 million tons of merchant shipping. The submarine campaign against Japanese merchant marine represents one of history's most successful applications of intelligence-driven warfare. 263 American submarines undertook war patrols. They sank 1,214 merchant ships, destroyed over 4.7 million tons of shipping, cut Japan's maritime supply lines completely, brought an empire to its knees through systematic economic warfare. The cost was high. 52 submarines lost, 3,506 men killed, 20% casualties. But the strategic impact was decisive. By August 1945, Japan couldn't continue fighting even if it wanted to. No fuel, no food, no supplies, no hope. The merchant marine that once sustained an entire empire lay at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, victims of American submarines, victims of broken codes, victims of commanders like O'Kane, who attacked with relentless aggression. The lesson endures. In modern warfare, economic power matters as much as military might. Intelligence capabilities trump numerical advantages. Small, mobile forces, guided by perfect information, can devastate larger, traditional opponents. Japanese admirals learned this lesson at catastrophic cost. The merchant fleet they sent to sea never came home. The supply lines they needed to sustain their empire were cut. The war they thought they could win was lost, not on battlefields, but in the water-filled cargo holds of 1,200 merchant ships resting in Pacific darkness. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.